It's my great pleasure to introduce Nora Esram. Nora, I've worked with Nora for many years, and she's the Senior Director of Research at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. And I want to talk a little about Nora because she's going to give you a great talk today about preparing tomorrow's workforce for buildings of the future. And she'll be talking a little about some trends in building technology and some things happening in the workforce, as well as some of the federal funding in this area. And coming off of that last talk about climate change, hopefully you'll be prepared to listen closely for the things that you can do to help facilitate making sure that we're creating a vision for our technology retrofits and new technology, as well as workforce training. Nora oversees a broad portfolio of activities at ACEEE related to buildings, industry, transportation, and behavior. And she leads a number of research programs. Prior to being at ACEEE, she was at Pacific Northwest National Lab, and she worked with electricity and energy efficiency in the buildings division for 10 years. And she also has a PhD from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and a Master's of Arts in Architecture from Singapore. And she has very strong background in building technologies, energy efficiency, plus human behavior, psychology, and urban planning. So a great mix of skills to help us think about what are we doing with our workforce in the building sector, and what are the opportunities in the coming years. So Nora, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to your remarks.
All right. Thank you for the introduction, Marianne. Hello and a happy new year to everyone. I really appreciate the speaking opportunity. A little bit about ACEEE, American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. ACEEE is a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. We work to transform and optimize how we use energy throughout the economy. We see energy efficiency as key to rapidly and equitably combating climate change, as Marianne just mentioned, while improving our economic well-being. Oh, sorry, here we go. I joined ACEEE in 2020. Prior to that, I was an engineer at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. 10 years ago, while I work at the lab, I was fortunate to get to lead a vision development for buildings in 100 years. That was like a dream project for an architect like me in the lab. I assembled a team full of brilliant scientists and engineers, and everybody was eager to think out of the box. So our brainstorming session quickly drifted from smart buildings to living on Mars. I was like, okay, wait a second, team. I think we need to define a so-called system boundary. We agreed on a context under which future building will likely be built. That is continuing population growth and urbanization, the associated demand for housing, and changing climate. We also centered our thinking around the fundamental human need for health and well-being because it drives our decision-making consciously or unconsciously. Well, none of us in the team, probably including you, have lived for a century. So to get a sense of the time scale, we look at what have happened in the past 100 years. Within a century, Wright brothers' first flying machine and Ford's first automobile, it's called Model T, have turned into ubiquitous air and ground transportations today. In a century, the 10-story skyscraper in Chicago have been dwarfed by the 163-story, it's called the Burj Khalifa in the United States Emirates. Not only have buildings grown taller, but building technologies have also dramatically shaped our life thanks to the inventions like household appliances, air conditioning system, and telecommunication. We were in awe and didn't think anyone could predict the technology advance in 100 years. However, we do know what challenges we are encountering today and tomorrow. And we do know what we want the future built environments look like. That is a healthy environment empowered by a clean and just economy. So based on that, we work with nearly 100 experts presenting 60 organizations to develop a vision that includes 13 characteristics of future buildings. I'll spend a few minutes to go over some key features. So today, changes are happening at multiple scales, and many are driven by what matters consumers. Personal devices make our life convenient, productive, efficient, fun, and supposed to be healthier. They also allow buildings to sense occupants' location, understand their preferences and expectations, and possibly predict their behaviors. We haven't fully utilized this vital data to improve building operation yet. This picture is actually a skin tattoo sensor that I scanned from an IEEE magazine 10 years ago. We are on the verge of being able to monitor our physiological indicators day and night at a minimum cost, and with technologies so unobtrusive that you will forget their presence. Future building will be able to use occupants' biometric data to provide a personalized environment. Buildings can harness occupants' needs, forecasts of weather conditions, and grid signals to use minimum amount of resource to achieve better occupant satisfaction. In building space, we have seen sensors that can measure lots of environmental data, and they're getting cheaper and smaller. Homes become smarter and more connected too. Saving energy is one of the drivers behind this trend, but probably not the main one. With virtual communications, we have seen changes in the work environment. Just like this shared workspace you can see here, technologies can help occupants find the most comfortable and productive environment. Future buildings will be more multifunctional and easy to reconfigure to accommodate changing needs. Building components can communicate with each other. Modular components make it easy for buildings to adapt to changing functions and external conditions. I want to add a side note here. The pandemic has changed how we view work and workspace, right? Some cities are exploring the idea of converting empty offices into housings and transforming downtown neighborhoods. The major challenge is that most buildings are not designed to be versatile. There was a recent New York Times article on this. In Washington, D.C., just 1 in 20 office buildings is a good candidate for housing conversion. The conversion alone may cost between $400 to $500 per square foot. That would, in many cases, be more expensive than building a new development. Similarly, New York City found 3% office space in New York City could be viable for apartment conversions, not to mention the cost of rent will likely be unaffordable. So it is really sad to see many things that are built for a specific purpose have gone unused. We need to keep that in mind when we think about buildings of the future. So back to our vision, future buildings will be more connected by a multimodal transportation network, including the autonomous vehicles that we are seeing today. However, I believe self-driving electric vehicle alone are not the solution to future mobility. Why? Because future building will need more land to provide ecological functions on site, not only for themselves, but also for other buildings in the community. Buildings are connected to share or trade their resources and services. Imagine within a community network, a certain percentage of buildings can be operated without direct generation for a certain period of time. Scalable solutions to improve efficiency, resilience, and intelligence occurred really at a community level. A building's positive and negative impacts on its community can be measured and tracked in real time. The performance data are reflected in the building's market value. So this is the buildings of the future in a nutshell. I hope some of you feel inspired by this vision. You may think, we have seen many of these technologies today. Why does it take a century to realize such a vision? I will say because building stock turnover is extremely slow. We have seen 14 generations of iPhone in 15 years. New cars are fully redesigned about every 5 to 7 years. An average building structure can last 70 to 80 years. My back of the envelope calculation, 10 years ago shows that it will take about 100 years for the US commercial and residential buildings to completely turn over. This doesn't include the historical buildings, by the way. Not only does it take long to upgrade building projects, but also costs a lot more than a new phone and a car. So when we talk about building stock change, we really need to think at scale. A useful vision should be a process and not a point. The journey towards buildings of the future is an evolution, not a revolution. So this applies to workforce development. Now let's talk about workforce of the future. Looking back, I found one key component that was missing in my vision development is workforce development. How should we envision the workforce of the future? Our workforce development has been, I would say, more reacting rather than proacting. We often develop vision to predict the future and set a direction for the workforce, rather than giving the workforce the skills and tools to empower them to imagine and build a future together. So what do I mean? I'm sure many of you are a parent like me with young kids, I guess. So let me ask you, what would you like your kids to learn now so that they can be more competitive when they grow up? I'm wondering how many of you are thinking of coding. Why do many parents, including myself, send our kids to coding class? Because we can point to an entire generation of coder millionaires. Those who learn to speak the language of computers be the right of us to the golden mine. No doubt that the future will be more technology driven. However, the problem is that the popular coding languages that the kids are taught to master today, such as Python, Java, HTML, will likely become outdated when they enter the workforce. Agree? Instead, we should prepare our children's digital futures by equipping them with technological agency, making sure they know how to apply their critical thinking, entrepreneurial, creative, and social skills by wielding digital tools. I think the college training should be designed with a similar philosophy. With so much talk of transformation and disruption, no one really can predict the future. One challenge with training the workforce for emergent technologies is that no one knows when exactly the massive demand for these new skills will be there. We develop our training based on what are needed in the market right now and what we think may be needed in a few years. Sometimes the job market has changed by the time the workers are fully trained, and sometimes the demand takes much longer to rise at scale. So the key question that we should ask is what skills we should give to the workforce so they can prepare themselves to adapt and evolve as the future built environments and technologies change over time. Let's bring our attention from the next 100 years to the next 10 years. ACEEE conducted a study on essential skills needed for high-performance buildings. A high-performance building by ASHRAE is defined as a building that consistently deliver a highly productive environment without wasting resources. So our study assessed specific workforce skill gaps and their impacts. It also analyzed available training to bridge these skill gaps and offer strategies to improve workforce education and training to broaden the pool of skilled workers. So I would like to share some of the key findings. Through a literature study and a survey of 111 buildings, including owners, managers, operators, technicians, service providers, our research team found 5 categories of technical skills that are essential for high-performance building workforce. They are operations and maintenance, O&M, system integration, system testing and evaluation, data acquisition and analysis, and system design and performance modeling. 92% of the respondents said O&M skills are the most critical. The specific proficiency include using cost-benefit analysis to refine efficient goals, optimizing systems, and diagnosing and correcting problems before systems fail. It also involves operating and maintaining equipment controls and automation systems. We also found that the workforce needs training in non-technical skills to perform effectively. The most essential ones are critical thinking, communication, and teamwork. Let me explain why. High-performance buildings rely on integration of complex technologies. Critical thinking can help building engineers identify issues that may affect multiple systems or components and correct them simultaneously. Building operators with problem-solving skills can use building energy data from building energy management systems to locate inefficiencies, identify problems, and resolve specific equipment or system issues. A facility staff with strong communication skills will be able to better explain the value of advanced systems and persuade decision makers to invest more, especially when they talk with their non-technical colleagues and their senior management. Building professionals also need ability to work in teams and collaboration with technicians, trades to ensure they can integrate and operate efficient system in the proper way. So who needs these skills? Equipment installers, building system technicians, system engineers, building operators and managers, facility managers, and just to name a few. Not only should our training programs make their students aware of possible careers in the field and teach them the skills they need to succeed, but also the program should help students see themselves and see their critical roles in developing the future. Why is it important? Because they are the one to ensure technologies deliver the promise. Buildings that are operated outside their intent parameters can increase its energy use from 15 to 30%. Not to mention the negative impact on equipment service life, repair cost, and occupants' comfort, health, and productivity. So this means building owners may pay for fancy building technologies, but not really get a full range of benefits. That situation, combined with the uncertainty around how much energy could actually be saved, may persuade consumers or customers from further investment or their confidence in these technologies and slow down their adoption. The ACEEE report looked into 2 general approaches to train high-performance building professionals. One is upskilling or continuing education and certification programs for professionals who need to fill these knowledge gaps. The other is career-oriented training for new entrants to the field, including high school and community college students. In this report, you will find 8 types of training programs. We provide examples. You can see best centers are included here. I'll let you check it out if you're interested. I'm using high performance building here as an example. as I have described in the vision, future building will be even more interconnected than today. To transform our building stock, we need a variety of professionals and much broader skills. Some of them may haven't been well defined yet. I would like you all to think creatively and dream big. So I'm going to switch gear again here. So for our wildest dreams come true, we need funding. Now let's talk about the forthcoming federal investment in buildings and the potential opportunities for workforce development. Over the next 10 years, nearly $2 trillion in federal funding will flow into the US economy for infrastructure upgrades, clean energy, domestic semiconductor manufacturing, and science and technology innovation. The funding is driven by 3 pieces of legislation: the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act, IIJA, someone calls EJ or IJ, also known as Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, BIL, you see different acronyms. The second is the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA. And then the last one is CHIPS, the creating helpful incentives to produce semiconductors and Science Act. You may have come across different analysis and presentations on these federal funds, and today I will focus on building decarbonization, which includes home electrification, home retrofits, and new zero energy buildings. I will also talk about the funding related to workforce development. I'll focus on IRA and IIJA. CHIPS authorized funding for workforce development that is related to the semiconductor industry. There might be some aspects relevant to buildings, but we'll need to wait a little bit longer and see how that will shape up. IRA and IIJA allocate about $32 billion for building decarbonization, among which $25 billion for programs and tax incentives to improve the energy efficiency of existing homes, as well as to electrify and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. These numbers you're seeing here do not include cross-cutting programs and broader greenhouse gas emission reduction programs that could be used for home efficiency. These numbers are based on ACEE's analysis, so it's really primarily to give you a sense of scales rather than being very precise. You see question mark here for American Rescue Plan Act because the funds can be used for building decarbonization, but we don't know, until the specific plans are developed by the federal and state governments. So let's start with building retrofits. 4 buckets of funding will be used for home retrofits. The first 3 are for residential. The last one is for commercial. The first is home energy performance-based whole house rebates, or called HOMES. State energy offices will operate this $4.3 billion DOE program to provide rebates for whole home retrofit packages based on the reduction in home energy use. The program is available for all income levels and include apartments. Incentives for most households are $2,000 for 20% energy reduction and $4,000 for 35% energy savings. And these numbers are doubled for household with an income below 80% of the area median income, or called AMI. The second one is a Weatherization Assistance Program, WEB. WEB provides grants to cover the cost of home weatherization, typically for families earning less than 200% of the federal poverty level. Funding per household or apartment is typically capped at an average about $8,000. And just to give you, a sense compared to the first one, the program has operated for more than 40 years. And IIJA included $3.5 billion for WEB to be spent over several years. And just to give a comparison, the current WEB funding level, it's about $1 billion per year. The third one is energy efficiency and climate resilience in affordable housing. This is a $1 billion grant and loan program for affordable apartments. to improve energy and water efficiency, air quality and sustainability, and climate resilience. That includes solar, battery storage, and other measures. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, will operate a program and provide grants and loans directly to HUD-assisted multifamily building owners. This program also includes funds for energy benchmarking and for technical assistance. The last one is 179D, energy efficient commercial building deduction. This is another long-standing federal tax provision that IRA made more generous. IRA provides tax deduction up to $5 per square foot. It has also extended 179D from privately owned commercial buildings to public and nonprofit buildings. That will include most of the college campuses here. The deduction can then be passed on to the primary designers of the property because the nonprofit organization do not pay tax. The second funding category is home electrification. Funding comes from two buckets. The first is high efficiency electric home rebate program. This $4.5 billion DOE program also will be administered by state energy offices to provide rebates to low and moderate income households to install heat pumps and other efficient electric equipment. It also includes insulation and air sealing and upgrade electric service and wires. There is an income cap of 150% AMI. There are maximum incentive for each type of equipment, as well as a $14,000 per household cap. The second one is 25C, energy efficient home improvement credit. This is a long-standing federal tax credit for home energy improvements, such as insulations, windows, heat pumps, and furnaces. I'm using heat pump as an example. IRA increases the credit to 30% of costs, or up to $2,000. The credit is taken on tax returns, and therefore it's only used for households that pay taxes. The third funding category is for new constructions. IIJA provided $225 million for implementing activities supporting updated energy codes and encourages so-called partnerships comprised of state and state governments and other key stakeholders. IRA added $1 billion. 1/3 of the billion is for supporting adoption of latest model energy codes, and 2/3 are for supporting adoption of zero energy codes. The next one is a 45L credit. It's a tax incentive available for home builders and multifamily developers since 2005. It allows contractors to claim a $2,000 tax credit for each new efficient homes. IRA extended 45L through 2032 and set up a new criteria. For example, $2,500 for Energy Star homes and $5,000 for zero energy ready homes. Multifamily units meeting prevailing wage requirements are eligible too. We have talked about 179D, so I'm going to skip that here. Sorry, a little bit dry at this point, lots of numbers and program names. I'm almost done. Some broad grants could be used for building decarbonization. These are really, I mentioned, not including in the numbers we added up. Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is a $27 billion set of programs to be run by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. The programs will provide competitive grants to states, tribes, cities, and nonprofit organizations, who in turn provide financial and technical assistance for projects that can reduce or avoid greenhouse gas emissions or other forms of air pollution. Most of the funds are for low income and disadvantaged communities. EPA also has climate pollution reduction grants to state and cities, and environmental and climate justice block grants for community-based organizations, different audiences. In addition to these programs, IIJA also provided direct funding to states and municipalities under State Energy Program, SEP, and then Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grants, ECBG. Those are the existing programs. As I mentioned, cities and states also receive federal funds as part of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, that can be used for some energy efficiency measures, among many other purposes. At least 100 billion appears to remain unallocated at this point. In addition, our IRA contains expanded tax credits for solar and battery systems that can, complement energy efficiency investment in existing homes and buildings. Now let's quickly talk about grants for workforce development. Overall, I will say there is very limited funding labeled for workforce development or occupation-specific training. In many cases, funds can be used for workforce development and technical assistance. However, they're not earmarked for that specific purpose. It's up to the federal agencies and eligible grant recipients, states, municipalities, and tribes to develop programs to support their local workforce programs. So on the left, through IJ and IRA, DOE, the Department of Energy, is administering over 250 million in grants to help states, nonprofits, and industry prepare a workforce to deliver energy efficiency and electrification. The grants are managed by the new DOE Office of State and Community Energy Program, SEP. There are 4 sub-programs. The first is the Energy Audit Training Grant Program. It will provide 14 million in grants to eligible states to train individuals to conduct energy audits or surveys of commercial and residential buildings. The Career Skills Training Program will provide 10 million in grants for partnership comprised of nonprofit, industry, and labor organizations. The program will fund these partnerships that give students both classroom instruction and on-the-job training to obtain industry-related certification to install energy efficiency building technologies. The third is the Building Training and Assessment Centers program. This is new. It will provide 10 million in grant to institutions of higher education to establish building training and assessment centers to prepare building technicians and engineers to identify and deliver energy efficiency upgrades to business and institutional buildings. It's modeled after the industrial training and assessment center that has been managed by DOE for many, many years. The last is the state-based home energy efficiency contractor training grant program. It will provide 200 million, is the biggest one among the 4, for states to reduce the cost of training residential energy efficiency and electrification contractors and their employees. On the right side of the slide, you can see examples of grants that can be used to support workforce development, such as the 1 billion for energy codes adoption and compliance, and the 2.8 billion for energy and climate justice blocks grant. Sorry, mouthful. I have already mentioned both of them. So quickly, just give you an example to see how workforce is part of larger grant. On December 2019, DOE issued the bipartisan infrastructure law, resilience and efficient codes implementation funding opportunity announcement, so-called FOA. The available funds for this round is 45 million, and there are 6 areas of interest. One is workforce development, and I highlighted the relevant piece for your information, also including some details here you want to look it out later. DOE announced the formula grant portion of the ECBG in November and released an RFI, request for information, for the competitive portion in December. If you're interested in learning more, DOE will hold webinars to share information and answer questions about the ECBG program. Overall, this is all the information I would like to share today. I hope I have helped you understand where the investment will be, where the needs will be, and where the opportunities will be. In the near term, I hope this information can give you the knowledge and tools to prepare and propose ideas, either to DOE or other agencies, your local governments, to build and expand your training programs, curriculum, or other activities. In the long term, I really hope this federal investment may help you and your students grow skills to explore other opportunities in the future. So that closes my presentation. I really hope you're feeling excited and energized now. If you feel lost in those programs' names and numbers, I would say don't worry. There will be lots of ways to get this information, including through probably LBNNL and us. If there is only thing I really hope you can remember after my talk today, that is, we need every one of you to build buildings of the future together. Community colleges have positively impacted their local economies through workforce education that effectively prepare tomorrow's leader. I felt deeply touched when Joe Biden said, one of the things that make community colleges so special is they do not pick and choose their students. They work with all students. I think your responsibility is to help your students see the exciting pictures of buildings of the future and help them see themselves in that future, equipping them with the essential skills to create a future with us, or even empower them to build a future that you and I could never have dreamed of. So back to you, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Nora. I really like how you were able to weave together a vision for the buildings in the future and where we're headed as an industry and what's holding us back. It's really great to see the way you framed this, and then going into workforce. What do we need to achieve that vision? And then the funding that's currently available. That's really exciting, and I really appreciate the presentation. And the materials you presented are so important because it's hard to understand the current funding landscape. So we have recorded this session, and this will be available. The PowerPoint is currently available to people, and this is going to be a great resource for a number of our partners around the country. Thank you so much. We have one question that was dropped in. I see a couple more coming in now. Here's the first question for you. Is the IRA funding for home efficiency contractor training only for colleges or for private training organizations?
So I will say, I don't know the exact answer because a lot of programs haven't been announced and designed, right? But this is really a time, there are different channels when DOE put out a request for information. It is the time to put in, what do you think, who should be covered, who should be benefited? Using the Industrial Assessment Center as example, it was for higher education universities, but they have already expanded to community college and other organizations, and because of Justice 40 priority from the current administration. Yeah,
I appreciate that answer because I was also not clear whether community colleges might be recipients of some of that funding. And then the person added like a 501c3, a nonprofit or something like that. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And that's an ongoing discussion. I'm sure the Best Center can help us navigate those waters also. Another question is, can you speculate on how the money will be divided? Would it be proportional to state population or total of the US population, for example? How do the states get allocated for these funds?
So the funds, as I mentioned, are so-called formula grant. And then some has been already announced, and each state or localities get a portion of that. I think there is a formula behind that. It's likely population related. There might be other consideration. For the competitive grant, usually the thinking is, how do you demonstrate the lasting impact? That's one. Really, how do you benefit the underserved communities? I think with this in mind, and DOE or other agencies, I'm just getting, interpreting how they may be viewing all of these applicants to prioritize, especially traditional places has been underinvested, will get a higher priority. I think
Yeah.
that's not just my speculation. Many people believe that's the direction to go.
Another question. What's the title of the ACEEE workforce study?
Oh, what's the title?
Training the workforce for high performance buildings, enhancing skills for operations and maintenance. That's the ASHRAE guide that's linked there too. But I think, if any of you go to aceeee.org and look for a workforce, I think it's pretty easy to find.
Yep. We will be doing more work in that space. If you'd like to follow up our activities, and just send me an email, we'll make sure we get our news updates to keep you posted. Yeah.
Thank you. There's one more question. So we have about 3 minutes. I'm looking at the clock here. If any amounts are unspent, will they roll back into their specific allocations, or will they be redistributed based on demand? For example, if money's left over for contractor training, can the funds be reallocated to other high demand areas perceived?
I think that's the agency. Marian, I'm sure you have experience with those unspent funds. You maybe even to comment on that. Yeah.
Yeah, TBD, I think. I mean, I think it's possible, but they do get slotted for the different offices and different budgets. So it's going to be, there's a lot of activity at the federal government as well as the U.S. Department of Energy to try to get these out.
All right.
I have a question for you because of your broad knowledge. I'm kind of interested in the concept of health and behavior. We didn't talk a lot about, well, we talked a little about health, but when you think about what ACEEE is doing and what's happening in the building sector, can you make a few comments about health in buildings and how it relates to the types of things we've been talking about?
Okay. There's several thoughts, right? The first is we all believe health is a major driver, but it's so difficult to quantify. That's why we often design programs and projects just after the number, the dollar saved, the energy used, the carbon emission even can calculate it. When you come to health, it's a longer term project. It takes a lot of effort to get the data to be convincing. So I think that's really one challenge, and we really thinking hard in that space. The second is really integrating health with efficiency. During the pandemic, we see some conflicts, right? If the building equipment, there's like a ventilation requirement, but buildings are not really ready to provide that level of ventilation. All of a sudden energy use goes up with energy price goes up. It is really hit the underserved community really hard. So we need to, from the get-go, when we design the system, really thinking about how to integrate health, indoor air quality is apparent one, and their lighting and other aspects into the system design. The third one, what we are working on is really so-called abraded funding to really share the responsibility and the benefits at the same time. There will be funding to address, and there's so-called, I don't know if your audience are familiar with this so-called deferral situation, right? When household goes, utility asks for incentives or efficiency program, they look at your house, they say, no, there are other things need to be fixed yet first, so therefore you're not qualified. The so-called deferral rate is really high for WEP, for utility efficiency program. So some of the health funding from I'm blank on the NIH will be able to, or even CDC eligible for that. But the way the fundings has been designed are so siloed. It's very difficult to bring them together. On the other hand, I will also say there's a critical workforce component. The people who operate those fundings really do not have the education and training to do things simultaneously. Even the money is there to be grabbed. Nobody submit their application because operation is so complicated. I think it's kind of a complicated issue, but I do see there are solutions. We need to address them all together.
Thank you. I brought that up because there's a fascinating topic in our field around Justice 40 and trying to make sure that the benefits of the investments that we're making are they're valued by low and moderate income populations, disadvantaged communities, and a lot of those often have the poor air quality. So when we think about weatherization and decarbonization, hopefully there's a win-win when we electrify space heating and cooking and water heating, that we actually have fewer emissions in the home. But those are complex technologies, you know, and as you said, measuring the impact of the indoor air quality benefits is quite a challenge. It's easy to measure energy efficiency. Well, I wouldn't say easy, easier. And anytime you're tracking health benefits, tracking what happens to people is a challenge also. So there's a lot of privacy and behavior issues there. So, but I think it's an important element of what we're doing is that, you know, we want to do decarbonization, but as you mentioned in the very beginning, we want to make sure our buildings are healthy and there's broad benefits to consumers and homeowners and customers and tenants, not just homeowners.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I will add that health is also a way to get your audience engaged, right? It's not everybody's really that tech savvy to get into energy efficiency savings, calculating dollars. For some families don't. But it's really, you know, sometimes I heard talking about health is just a sales pitch. I was like, no, it's not a sales pitch. It speaks to our fundamental needs. It gets people attention. People care when you're really talking about their health and well-being. Yeah.
The other thing about health that you've probably heard, Nora, you mentioned a little bit about resilience, and there's all kinds of elements of resilience. And one of the things that I know in the buildings industry there's been talk of is actually thinking about air conditioning as a health device, because it's getting hotter in many parts of the country, and many homes don't have air conditioning, and a lot of elderly or other compromised health issues, folks may be really impacted by the lack of an air conditioner. And, you know, there's talk about trying to get health insurance benefits and things like that for an air conditioner. So it's quite an interesting synergy between energy using technologies and climate resilience adaptation, but making sure it's an energy efficient air conditioner was a mitigation strategy. So I think the extreme cold we think of for weatherization programs traditionally, but extreme heat is a new challenge that's growing, and we'll continue to see that around the country.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Part of the vision development, we were talking about, you know, buildings as a first defense of public health. This has really become important, you know, comfort, safety, as well as a pandemic or contagious disease. I think we'll feel it when there's a health problem, everything else stops.
The overlap between grid events, extreme heat, and problems on the grid is interesting too, because often those hottest days, the grid is peaking, and then you might have outages. So the other one I want to mention is the concept of batteries and solar as a climate resilience for grid outages. Is ACEEE doing much, or do you see that beyond your scope?
We do have a utility program that look at the cleaner grid, but our aspect is really, you know, not the renewable generation, but demand flexibility, you know, similar to what LBNL has also been focusing on. It's really, we see efficiency as a way to reduce the cost and risk when we transition to clean energy. We need to build in this flexibility, lower demand, have all of this interconnectivity so that we're ready to move forward, rather than, you know, just a small group of buildings and ready to take the benefits of renewable energy. The rest is still living on this traditional grid.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Nora. I really appreciate the discussion today. Your PowerPoint briefing has a great set of materials for our audience. So thank you so much for preparing it and delivering that address today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.